All right, so I see we have a quorum. Hey, Bill, hey, good to see you.
Nice to be here.
How you feeling?
Good, thanks.
Hey, welcome everybody. So we're here just to finalize the process that we started and vote on the fees. So I guess I would like to start off with the proposal. And I think David, thank you for forwarding that for us to get a chance to read ahead of time.
Okay, let me. Yeah, do we need to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Oh, yes, I guess. Thank you. It's just kind of hard to get to the one agenda item, and I appreciate everybody's time as well. I want to be positive of that since this is a spillover. So yes, if anyone have any feedback, or changes on the minutes? David? Hey, David? You're usually the one who has some things to say about previous minutes. Did they pass your muster? And
I think so.
Well, then, would you care to make a motion?
I make a motion that the minutes from September 19th be accepted as final.
Okay, do I have a second?
I second that motion.
Any discussion? Then we come to the vote.
It has to be roll call because we have one member that's remote.
Okay, so Wells?
I.
I'm sorry, yeah. Sorry.
The real Jeff.
You can go by Jeff. I'll go by Jeffrey. So, Wells, I need your vote. We're doing roll call.
Aye.
You voted.
Oh, okay. I didn't hear. Bill?
Aye.
Jeff?
Aye.
David. Minutes are accepted. So yes, let's go to the proposal.
Sure. First of all, I sort of put together a presentation that I thought would work just as well for this group, as well as working for the select board when we do make our final recommendations. Just a little bit, I think, speaking to some of the questions that have come up about like where we are and why we're doing this. So I just thought it would be helpful for a framing conversation. So one of the things that happened that was sort of interesting was that the town renegotiated a contract with, at the time, I think it was Wheelabrator, before they had a sale of their company. And as part of this renegotiation, that wasn't just Needham, it was the entire consortium that subscribes to that service. We actually saw a reduction in tipping, right? So that's not a normal occurrence that happens where your costs for a service go down. But because they were trying to get their books in order and we had an opt-out after 10 years, they had an incentive to negotiate with us, and we had some leverage at that particular time. So because of that, we actually saw a reduction of our tipping fee by 15%. And it wasn't until this year, fiscal 24, that our tipping fee has returned to the 2014 rate. So that's a pretty significant period of time to have a reduction of cost. So the tipping fee, the way we have it set up in our contract, it is based, it's an index inflator that we have every year, and it's fixed for the 12-month period that we have the contract. We had been evaluating, services and looking at costs. So when we were at 2015, we did not decrease our tipping fee to the commercial customers because we figured that, again, it's a service that we're providing beyond our residential kind of obligation. And so we decided to keep it as 140, knowing at the time we were probably a little on the higher end for the market because of what was happening in trash. And we kept that stable. And in 2019, we took a look at our costs. And we did have a conversation internally about whether or not we should make a recommendation to increase some of our fee structure. And then the pandemic hit. So we were already sort of having these conversations because even though our tipping fee had not returned to its pre-2015 levels, we did have increases from cost of living adjustments for our staff, as well as increases in the cost of materials. The cost of hauling increased during that time. So we did have costs that increased that we wanted to look at to build into a tipping fee rate. When the pandemic hit, we had an increase in bulky waste because everyone was clearing out their basements. And then in 2021, due to a few factors, one, Needham being one of the most the lowest priced tipping, but another being the closure of the Dedham facility. There was a private facility in Dedham that accepted solid waste from commercial entities closed. And so we saw a huge influx of commercial clients coming to Needham, to the point where we actually had to stop people coming in because our staff could not handle the volume of material that came in. And so we sort of had a conversation internally of what's the purpose of the RTS? Why do we have it there? What services are we providing as a municipality? And then what additional services can we provide that help bring in revenue that offset the cost of providing those services to residents, right? And that's sort of been the model that we've looked at with the RTS. We really had the conversation of, do we increase our fees significantly and add an FTE or do something budgetarily that would allow us to continue to provide that level of service? Or do we look at, you know, just adjusting our fees to make sure that we are charging like a fair market rate and not overburdening our staff? So that's sort of the conversations that we had in preparation before coming here.
Yeah, Kara, you know, we were, the committee, you know, we continued to meet regularly. So we're sort of complicit in this because we were not in the dark. We were well updated with annual reporting by the previous superintendent. So, you know, so we're aware. We knew and you know and knew where we sat in the, you know, with the tax base as well and going beyond just the customers. So
I think one of the things that is also driving this outside of just the increase of volume that we're seeing is knowing that we have an increase in tipping fee that's going to happen in 2024, 2028. So looking at neighboring communities or neighboring facilities, knowing that their tipping fees are higher than ours. So if we're paying $78 and most commercial tipping fees are $200, that's a pretty big delta that we're likely going to be breaching when we do that new contract. So part of it is we want to try to prepare for that increase in time, and make sure that we're not, you know, we talked about some frustration that it was a 40% increase, but we don't want to be in a place where we have to do 100% increase because all of a sudden our rates are so far out of line with what our costs are. The other thing we just sort of talked about is like, what's the primary function from a municipal perspective of providing trash service? And it really is providing trash service to businesses and residents as far as providing a place for them to dispose of their trash, and sort of secondarily is the commercial revenue that comes in and not primarily existing just to accept commercial revenue. So we've always sort of seen that, and there's a whole host of activities outside of just MSW that we provide to commercial entities. We've seen that as an opportunity to offset some of the costs of running the facility, not just a service that we provide to the community. Because that has more of a commercial aspect to it as opposed to residential drop off and local business drop off, which is more, if you were doing a curbside service, that would be more comparable to that service. So one of the proposals we made, and I think we went back and talked about if there was any way to break it out further, and we really do feel that this is the most we could break out commercial entities, is breaking out backdoor commercial entities, which are largely local businesses. There are 4 of them right now, who, when we pull the rate, the number of customers they have, they all roughly have about 300 customers each. So they service about 1,200 homes in town, providing them a tiered rate system over the commercial entities. So the other hauler in town don't come to the RTS. They actually go to their own facilities. So it's really only focusing on those. And that it really would be focusing on over the scale the over the scale rate would be focused on the backdoor customer service and not some of the other functions that those companies do provide to supplement their business. We really felt like the letters that were addressed to the select board, the letters that were addressed to the committee really focused on those small vendors in particular and the concern what it would do to those vendors, and not necessarily that it would raise the rate of the individual, but that they would have to transition to the larger commercial vendor that offers a more competitive rate because it would make the local vendor more expensive. So we really wanted to focus on those because that's where we really saw the vast majority of comments coming in were on that weekly payment that they're making for their service. So one thing I just thought it was really useful to have, and we didn't provide you last time, was really the overall picture of what our facility is. So going back to that like mission conversation we had over MSW, the residential and Needham pickup component of our revenue is, you know, around 35–36% of the waste that's coming into the facility. So we are talking about a lot of staff time and resources that go to process commercial waste.
How did we measure this?
This is over tonnage. So we actually weigh all of our tonnage when it goes over, we weigh the tonnage when it gets collected at the facility, and then the tonnage when commercial entities go over the scale.
And specifically, so the red indicates the stickers.
Okay.
Each truck is stickered to identify it. So those red, that red portion is from stickers that are doing household collections, what we're calling back of the door. The blue is the yellow bag containers. We weigh each container as it's coming into the building to tip.
Mm-hmm.
So we call that the yellow bag trash, and we term that the residential. The rest of it is commercial and bulky. And so, for instance, if you were in the facility, you brought us a couch or a carpet, that would be in the green, but your household trash in the yellow bag is going to be in the blue. And if you had a service picking up at your back door, you'd be in the red. So that's the breakout.
And none of the recycling is included in these numbers?
No, this is just MSW.
No, and the recycling numbers are probably comparable to the blue portion, like your household recycling of bottles and cans, your paper, your cardboard, and that equals roughly that blue segment is equal. Those are comparable.
The proportion between pickup and residential would be similar, right? Because they have to do this, they have to separate as well.
The red of the haulers coming in, they put their recycling into our containers prior. So they actually are, it's just the blue. So if I took the tonnage of all recycling process, a household recycling process of the containers, it would include the household collectors, and it would still only come to about 2,300 pounds per year.
Can we deduct from this graph that there is twice as many households that are using yellow bags as who are using commercial pickup?
You can deduct that the amount of waste that they dispose of is twice as much. You know what I'm saying? I agree. I get what you're saying.
I think we have more households. I think that people, my guess is about 5,000 households, 5,000 to 6,000 are using it weekly. And I would say more than that augment their service on occasion, but regular weekly trash, I think, is about 5,500 is my guess. And it looks like it's about, 12 to 1,300 are pickup.
So
that's even more in some ways than twice, right? 13.
Yeah, I mean, and those are hard numbers to come up with accurately, because I think it can be seasonal.
We don't need it. It's an impression. Okay. We don't have to get exact.
We just got hauling numbers from the Board of Health yesterday, so we really haven't had time to go through them, but each company has to list their approximate number of clients. So we can look at that, although we knew we were missing at least one of the vendors from that data. They were late on their permit, so we have to make sure that person gets their permit.
I called them immediately when I saw that and told them that paperwork.
So
So that was one of the questions that we had at the last meeting, with how many, people use those haulers, so.
So 1,200 people roughly use those 4 haulers.
You have the additional one that's set, take it to 5 haulers.
No, that wouldn't
That's
include,
included.
that's an estimate of.
Yeah, and then there are a larger number who utilize the large commercial hauler that does not tip at our facility.
And I mean, to further muddy that, the big hauler, Wind Waste, which bought out Orphis, when they list their number of households, I'm not sure if they're doing back of the building and some of the big multi-unit housing. If they tip a dumpster at the back of there and there's 300 units there, are they calling it 300 households? And is that one truck servicing that dumpster? Or is it spread out? So the information we have from the Board of Health doesn't provide us ultimate clarity, but I think we're gonna have to start digging into that a little bit, and I'll have that conversation with the Board of Health and Karis just to figure out, how, we want to get the best data we can.
Yeah, I think with Jeffrey, or at least, I don't know if you're along these lines, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that the breakdown of the number of residents that's really receiving the benefit, if you will, that's probably the key, right? At least in my opinion.
So I would say for the purposes of this particular conversation, looking at the people who utilize, this is really just the people who utilize the facility, right? So they either utilize it through a third party or they utilize it directly. I do think there's value in looking at that at a broader perspective. Just for this particular issue, the 2,000 people who use Orphis are really not even part of the equation because they're not impacted by this one way or the other. And the people who do their individual drop off, except for the bulky waste items, are not impacted by this. But if you were to go in with like a minivan full of, you just clean out your house and you fill your minivan up with trash, how big is that a ton? Is that a half a ton?
It really depends, like wet carpet, like we saw after the floods, very, very heavy. Insulation, you could fill up your minivan, it could be like less than 100 pounds. So it's really hard. A lot of times we'll put a load like that over the scale and then bill it accordingly. Like if we can't tell, we just need to get an accurate weight. We can change it from a scale fee to a bulky item fee if it's nowhere near there. But like, we're not going to dig into bags and check. But if it's plaster is super heavy. So it's difficult to tell.
But there's some flexibility at the scale to flex between that bulky item.
We can explain to them. I mean, typically the scale minimum applies to people who just drive onto the scale. But if someone says, I don't know how much this is, we put them over the scale, it comes to 200 pounds. That doesn't quite hit the minimum of that $30 mark now. So we bill them with like 2 medium bulkies, $20, they save $10. So.
But I think we're talking, sort of who benefits or, who has, suffers from this. When you say, the residential people aren't necessarily affected by this, but if we leave revenue on the table, right, and this is over several years, all right, that revenue has to be made up, all right, so it's going to impact them on our next vote if it doesn't impact us on this vote. So I don't think we can ignore that, that impact today.
And the reason that I'm backing into this is that the history, the background that you gave is excellent. But at the end of the day, the people that are probably going to be the most vocal are the recipients of the benefit. So in my opinion, people that pay for the service versus people that are actually using our TNS.
So just to clarify, the people who are using the backdoor service are the ones who are the most likely to complain about the benefit that we're even offering them with a tiered rate.
In addition to that, especially if the back door is telling them that the rates are going to go up.
Yes, and I think we talked about it anecdotally as far as looking at all the components that go into running a service like that. You have fuel, you have equipment, you have labor. Our tipping fee is but a portion of that. So one thing we haven't dug into, and anybody here knows somebody who has a service and knows what their changes have been over the past 10 years. If they have escalated at all over the past 10 years, that has absolutely nothing to do with the town fees. That has all been on those other items. So, you know, it's not that we don't understand that, but the average household is not producing an entire ton of trash and is not seeing that $60 increase. It's an aggregate of that entire pickup. But I don't disagree with you with what you're saying as far as who's going to be the most vocal.
And I think that, and again, I'll leave it at this. The other element is now we have composting, for example, and if you look at where the majority of the weight of the average household comes from, I mean, anecdotally, I'm using one of the small bags every 3 weeks. That's how much I'm able to essentially, by taking just the food portion out of and by being diligent about everything else being properly recycled, I use it we're a household of 4. I mean,
It's good, that's, yeah.
I'm down to 115 gallon bag a week, so you got me beat.
so no, and then I would wonder, like, do we have tonnage on the composter now?
Are you talking about the weight of the food waste? Yeah, so it's not actually going to compost.
No,
it's
it's being, yeah,
digesting.
it's getting
But
digested.
yeah, typically, I mean, I track it. I track every, you know, the schools have it, and there's an efficiency. If you can do larger volume with the pickups, you get efficiency. What I want to see is that food waste cost aggregated throughout the town, including schools and the RTS, come to below what we're paying for MSW. And that's my justification for expanding it, because it's not only a good idea environmentally, it's a good idea cost-wise, and we're getting there. So, but we're doing about, I'd say 9 tons, sometimes 10, sometimes 8 from the transfer station.
We could pull that out of this number.
Yeah, but
This is
I'd love to see that number go up.
Yep.
And from the schools, it's probably about 20 tons of all the schools. So we're doing about 30 tons less that goes out to Wheelabrator, because obviously those schools get collected and come back to the transfer station. So 30 tons, but you got to figure we're doing 800 tons or 700 tons a month out of the transfer station. So we're still below what we should be. We should be looking for over 100 tons eventually. Like that's what.
But that's an adoption thing too. I mean, you can say that.
Yeah, that's why we're starting with the kids in the schools.
But it's something that we don't collect revenue on, so like it's really amazing that we're reducing the amount going over the scale or in somebody's bag, but on the other end of it, we still have the same cost for running the facility, the staff, everything else, so we just have to figure out what that model is to make sure that we're still either collecting revenue or we'll have to get more you know, more in from the tax levy in order to account for that. So it's a good direction, and if we can reduce costs on top of it, it'll help, but we still have all that cost related to staffing and the
So
facility.
it's like that water dilemma, right? The less, you know, the less we use, the more, you know, the more it costs us, right? Yeah. Hey, Jeff, just for interest, do you have a trash compactor? You know, do you really now? I mean, I'm just saying, how do you go, you know?
Literally, honestly, I think that if the average person took the food, just the food component out of their trash, they would be blown away.
Yeah.
Now, I would.
I never measure mine because there's no food in my trash, so I don't get rid. I throw it in the basement, and it's like three weeks, or you know, it's like I don't even think about it until my recycling's overflowing. You know, that's when I have to go rid myself from stuff. So. But I take a few. I don't count it, but I use it. I throw my yellow bags in the car. I throw all the kitchen bags in there, and I stuff them. You know, there, and I have a.
Are you still seeing the big influx of contractors from out of town because of the Dedham closure? Or was that just kind of a?
So we pushed back on that. We knew it was coming as soon as we heard there were troubles over there. You know, I was messaging to the upper management. I'm like, look, we need to have a plan in place for when this happens. And yes, a lot of people wanted to come to Needham after that. And we probably let people in who really didn't have a local connection and weren't providing local services. So we pushed back against a couple of the big haulers. I still get calls from people, and I just say no unless they can really explicitly provide service for Needham residents or they're a Needham business. But I mean, just a separate issue, but something we bring up. That green takes a lot of our time, a lot of our effort, and if I have a piece of equipment go down, a lot of times it is managing that green part there. And that's what keeps me from going to the schools and running like education programs, which I've done, but I just don't have time for it. I mean, I'm scrambling to keep up, and I love the job and I love being busy. So I'm not saying like, let's stop it. But if there is an opportunity for, you know, funding it a little better, I mean, we do need to increase the food waste program, and, you know, you can't just start it and ignore it. You have to go back and make sure it's doing well. You have to support the science teacher who wants to work with the RTS to run a program on anaerobic digesting. You have to work with the kids who have designed a poster and it shows charts and graphs, you know, or the cycle of food waste, and you want to support those kids, and I just don't really have the bandwidth when I'm dealing with that green up there. So I'm not saying we have to shrink it, but I'm just saying one of our pushbacks was not just the funding, but it was the amount of time it takes. And I really kind of didn't have the time to put it together. I wanted to present pictures that kind of just showed the difference between that green and how it's like a debris. Right. And it's like pieces of wood that need to be kind of broken down, and it's got like nails in it or small pieces of metal, versus that trash that comes in that's just gooey. It slides off the back of the truck, and you know, one pass of the compacting dozer, and it's in a slush kind of slurry that can be loaded into the truck and moved out of there. And so this nothing's in a vacuum, but part of this conversation is that we really have an obligation to the town, the residents, and service to you and your children in the schools, and that's what we want to kind of work on.
It feeds into the adoption, right? If the kid comes home and is talking about it at home, then all of a sudden somebody's listening.
I mean, our long-term goal is reduction, really. I mean, we want that whole number to shrink down.
Right, and the green, it takes most of your time, and it doesn't have a proportional benefit to the town. You know, currently
it helps with the budget, but I think we need to just do an analysis.
So they're getting a deal, right? You know, for at the moment, and it's not benefiting us. So then, you know, it could benefit us more as we could take care of today.
So just a reminder on the current fee structure. So it's $140 a ton for over the scale. Matt did a audit of some of our MSW, and he basically looked at the bags, the tonnage that we had there, and backed it out to about $138 a ton for the pay as you throw trash, just for comparison purposes.
That was counting yellow bags in a load, taking the weight and the revenue in the yellow bags in there. And that was a snapshot. That's not a long-term. We probably need to do a better long-term study to get.
So is that just a coincidence? That's amazingly close.
Yeah, I mean, we did, I think I did probably under 5 tons of trash, and that's what it came to. Like, that was counting big bags, small bags, taking the tons.
So it is a coincidence.
So it is, well done.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys have done a good job lining that up.
So one of the things I just want to mention about these proposals is we intentionally stopped the fee at July 1st, 2025. And the reason for that is we are hoping to start negotiations on a new contract at that point, and I don't want to make any commitments as to how low or high we will keep it, because it could be a significant jump that we need to do in order to catch us up to where we need to be. So I don't want to say let's keep it at 10% or 15% if our MSW contract goes up to 3 times, which is possible. I don't want to say we're limiting our commercial customers at 10% when our costs are going up 3 times. So that's why we chose to end it at July 1st, 2025. Now, we're not saying we wouldn't encourage a robust conversation sometime, in March of 2025 to determine what the next year's rate would be. It's just that we don't want to prognosticate out too far because the costs are really variable at this time. So the 3 sort of options that we thought would be useful to sort of discuss here. The first was our original, which was a $200 across the board fee. The second one is a 10% increase. And we did take one of the recommendations that came out of our last meeting, which looked at having a rate change on January 1, and then a follow-up rate change on July to maybe step into the escalation as opposed to waiting an entire year to add additional cost. So one's 10%, one is a 15%, and then the other one I think was the proposal that was made in the meeting, which was looking at a 2-step phase-in process. One of the things we thought we heard was that we felt like the commercial entities should go to a higher rate at the end of that process, that 200 might have actually been low for our direction. So that's why you'll see 210 and 220 on the higher end years. And then what I thought was useful as we sort of extrapolate that down to what actual revenues look like, to sort of look at what we're currently collecting, what our proposal was, and then the various proposals and what that may or may not leave on the table. So what we did is we did a 4-year analysis, just looking at kind of baseline, assuming everything is the same, the tonnages are the same, the bag fees are the same, and then what the change of those fees will do to our potential revenue collection. And so you have the current over the 2.5-year period, the original proposal that we had put through, and then the 3 options that we thought would be worthwhile to consider today. I think that's it for what we have.
Can I, just a really quick question, we probably covered it. Why do we go from July 1st to 2024 all the way to July 1st to 2025?
So typically we've only done an annual increase.
Okay.
This would sort of be anomalous because we're, I guess,
6 months behind.
out of sync.
Okay, all right. So that January 1 of 2024
Is really,
making up-
would have been the 7/1/23.
Got it.
there any disadvantage to the, to tracking and managing this if you're at odd numbers versus even numbers, on a per ton basis for the town?
No, it's all done through a software system, so.
Okay,
Are you thinking more because of the optics?
partly, yeah.
Do you think you're like 159 as opposed to 160 or?
Or 165 instead of 161?
I'm like, you know, I'm letting it sink in. I know that, I'm sure everybody has something to say, you know, well, yeah, I mean, I'll open up the floor for discussion items for everybody. I guess, then, you know, do we wanna, you know, Jeff, do you wanna, after we get that feedback, do you wanna, you know, present your sheet or?
I don't, well, Wells is the one that sent it over. I guess I am curious, can you walk us through the current on the last slide?
So if we kept nothing, if we changed nothing, current would be what the revenue we would collect.
Okay,
But
that's an extrapolation based on what we know from historical.
yes, this is all based on approximate tonnages. So obviously if we did nothing for 2.5 years, that's what the flat revenue would be. If we did the original proposal, that's what the increase in revenue would be. And obviously we weren't looking beyond the first year of implementation, so we would have likely reevaluated it in a year. But I didn't make assumptions as part of this. I just stuck with the proposals that were on the table. Option 1 and option 2 are the percentage inflators, the 10 and 15%. So you'll see the revenue increase, but I just think it's important to show that the revenue increase is disproportionate to the cost, because the commercial entities are the largest entities that we have that are disposing of materials. And then option 3, you'll see it plateaus in the second year because we didn't have an option beyond it. So for any year, I would say that we didn't have an option, we would be reevaluating that fee in that year. So it's likely that there would be an increase. We just aren't predicting what that increase would be.
Do you have any feedback from anybody on this yet, or are we the first people that have?
You're the first, and we didn't have any, I mean, I will say it was.
In other words, like the finance committee hasn't seen it.
No, and I will say also at the last meeting that we did advertise that you were having this meeting to discuss these fees. And I do think it is valuable to note that no one, I mean, it was just the committee that was there, so we did get a lot of emails and feedback, but not anybody who attended to speak up or advocate at the meeting itself. And I don't think we have any today either.
Well,
But they were enforced at the selectmen's, meetings.
Yep.
I think that's where people pay their attention, you know. No one wants to pay attention to their trash. They want it to go away, they don't wanna pay for it, and they turn the blind eye.
Wells, I know you submitted a spreadsheet. Is that something that you included on your email this afternoon?
Well, I'd like to, before we jump into that, I mean, I guess I'd like to hear what, you know, people said, think, I mean, I guess to break the ice, I'll share, I'm more inclined to lean towards option 3, because I think that's more real time budgeting, rather than stretching it out over 3 years, like you talk about, that unknown, and the known is that it's gonna go up, and it's probably gonna go up a lot. So we might as well get to a place that's sort of our real sharing where we wanna be, because that's where we wanna be. We get there as quick as possible, rather than delaying that, and then all of a sudden, okay, we did that to be, weaning people into it, to get accepted to it, and then all of a sudden, oh, shoot, now we're gonna slam them again, and, then what we told you, no one listened, so they're gonna complain again, so why don't we just, pull the Band-Aid off and get where we need to be as soon as we get there, and then we'll be discussing this a lot. And the contract and all that as well then, and we'll be getting feedback about it then, and there's gonna be discussion about curbside and as well, that's gonna be another.
Curbside for all.
So.
And it's free.
Yeah, can I ask?
Yeah.
Joke.
Yeah, no,
Joke, I know we're recording.
what,
But that's the optics, people they don't pay attention, they don't pay attention to town government. The only time they do pay attention to it is when it goes up. And they didn't know what they were, and they don't know how to keep the costs down and how they operate. And they think, oh, if I put my barrels out, they disappear and I don't pay for it, right? And then they go, but can I have lower taxes? So that's my opinion.
did we, I know we talked about this and I just can't recall. The fees and the prices of the yellow bags. I see that in all 3 proposals, the only thing that really varies is the percentage of how we're calculating, right? Did we visit, when is the last time we visited the yellow bags?
So I think for the purposes of tonight, we're not discussing the yellow bags. That's a to be continued probably conversation that we'll have.
Okay.
Winter, spring, I would think, Dave, as far as discussing that. I think we are aware also that may need to be reevaluated. And we want to calculate that out to make sure that it's manageable. Again, it's one of those COVID things where we didn't really want to increase people's individual costs during a difficult period. And so now we have to figure out how do we land in an appropriate place for those bags.
But I think the question that just asking is, was it this long, before we consider a raise on the bags? And I think we've increased the bags more steadily than the scale, right?
The last time the bags were increased, Dave, is it?
And just reconfirming when that was, it's the last time the large bags were increased was September of 2018, and the small bags the last time was July of 2016. And just to let you know why were the large bags increased in 18 but not the small bags, there was a sense that 2 things, that the price differential between the small bags and the large bags, that the small bags were significantly more in cost per gallon than the large bags, but in marketing that's usually not unheard of. The second aspect was the thought that more elders used only small bags and they were looking to keep the cost down on the elders, and hence that's how why one got changed more recently than the other.
We are sensitive to those things, aren't we?
No, and I'm just, it's interesting, right? So the 30-gallon ends up coming out to $2 each. The 15-gallon is almost half at 108. One more smaller bag.
On option 3, the meaning of this is that July 2025, it would be 180 and 220s, and
No, I think the meaning of this is that we would bring back another proposal in the spring of 2025 to look at
under option 3.
under option 3.
So it's not decided.
No, that was, it was actually maybe your proposal the last time we talked, that we, figured to include. And we just decided on that particular proposal, because it's not based on a percentage increase, that we would reevaluate it based on what we then know at the time about how the market is functioning. Do the same thing we did, we'll sample neighboring communities, figure out what their fee structures are, and then also try to look at what our costs are related to increases we anticipate for just tipping fees for the town for MSW.
That's why that's why I support option 3, because on option 1 and 2, you know, we're committing to those numbers there, but I don't think we can. Right, you know, we're gonna have the more data and we're gonna say, oh, I know we said we were, you know, at 186, but you know, given where things are going.
Well, we're gonna be that much closer to the negotiation as well.
Yes.
So I think the reason we included 3 years for those options is because the rate is so much lower, just to get us to where we think we should be is just gonna take us longer. So that's why they had a 30-year included.
Feelings from everybody?
Just another quick question, why the second spreadsheet of on the two that were handed out? One,
So I think Wells would have to.
Yep. Do you guys want me to talk that real quick?
yeah, that'd be great.
So there were 2 things I just wanted to illustrate with that spreadsheet. So one thing was to illustrate that option 2. It doesn't honor the premise of keeping the price of the Needham pickup less than the price of all others. So ultimately, at the end, the price of the Needham pickup is $213, and everybody else is $210. And I thought that was something that we were trying to do with that. So option 2 didn't seem like a great fit from that perspective. And the other thing I put out there, and I know that you know, Karis was mentioning that, you know, in 2025 we would reevaluate, in 2026 we would reevaluate. But either way, we could take a quick look based on the last year and keep the prices the same, like make the assumption, how much money would we make, or how much more money would we make than our current fees if we go with each plan until 2028, keeping the plans the same from 2025 to 2028. And so that just helps illustrate kind of what the revenue is per plan. So you can see there that option 1, you end up with 2,200,000 more than the current day. Option 2, 2.7 million, and option 3, about 2.9 million. So just data to kind of illustrate how much additional revenue we'll get relative to what we get today. So that's what I put that together.
Well, I apologize if that is the case, which I see it is. That is a typo. It should not be increasing. So I will make that correction and send it out after this meeting.
Sorry, so which number? So for option 2, what
Option
would
2 should be a typo. So actually option 2, the rates for the all others is incorrect. I just fixed it. It should be 205 in July 1 of 2024 for all others. And it should be 220 in year 2025. So thank you for pointing that out, because that was a typo.
Got it. Okay. So that would change the variable of how much total revenue we would probably end up I think we would probably end up with more revenue than others with option 2. So based on that change, we would end up with the most revenue in option 2. And then option 3 would be slightly behind that. But in terms of the amount that Needham pickup is less, it would be, you know, just a very slightly less than everybody else. So.
So, any more questions or discussion? Are we at a point where people want to weigh in on their options? Your preference is it would be option 3, is that correct?
I mean, I think we're open to whatever makes the most sense. I think option 3 gets us where we were hoping to go a little bit faster. And I think leaves the least amount of revenue on the table from our initial proposals.
I agree with option 3, based on what Jeff and Carr said. Makes sense.
Me too.
Another item from that option 3 is good for is that there was a concern that, you know, people didn't want to have a continuous increase every 6 months or a year, and to do it in 2 increases rather than 3 dragged out over 18 months, I think would be preferable.
Okay, so I guess I need a motion. Or are we voting
If the committee is ready, a member could move that we recommend select board consider adopting option 3.
Okay.
But someone other than I have to make a motion.
Just one additional question.
Yes.
If we had to guesstimate or think about what the reaction to option 3 is going to be from a resistance perspective. I mean, we already went before the select board once. I guess I'm just curious how it's going to be received.
I think that option 3, it seems like out of all these options, it's the one that would be received the best relative to what the original option was, for 2 reasons. One reason is that all the plans do a phased approach. So that was one of the suggestions of the select board, was to take a phased approach. So all of these options basically they take the recommendation of the select board into account. And then the other aspect of it is that option 3 gives the most benefit to Needham residents. It ends with the lowest amount for Needham residents relative to the other plans, and it also decreases on an absolute basis, it decreases the amount that they would get to in that same amount of time. So it addresses that as well.
I think I agree, and if there is negative feedback, it also encapsulates a response that explains that Wells did so beautifully. You know, so and I think the selectmen would like to have sort of that, have an answer when people do say, because it's going up, so they're gonna complain, right? But we can say, we heard your feedback, we adjusted it, we weaned the increases, and we got to where we're gonna go, and then they can say, and this is also done in anticipation of our costs going to be going up significantly as well in the future. I think that's my pitch to the selectmen, you know, as well, because I have to sell it.
I mean, just what I know about these smaller businesses, I mean, they know they're kind of on alert that these costs are gonna come. And I think this adjustment you know, not only does it give them time, but it in that phase, the way that it's proposed here, it gives them more time to make their adjustments. Because as a small business, they don't have the power to just flip money from one account to another. So I think this does get the town to a place that's more aligned with where we should be, but it does it in a way that really eases the burden on the small business, you know, adjusting their finances.
I'd like to make a motion for option 3 to be presented to the select board.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Oh, I have to do the roll call. So, okay.
Sorry.
Wells, how do you vote?
Yes.
Aye, in favor.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, David, I have to voice this for, right, and Jeffrey P.
In favor.
And the chair vote, possibly. It's unanimous. So you have some updates beyond what your presentation
So just the only update I would say is that we were able to hire a new heavy equipment operator, and he has the licenses we need, specifically the Class A CDL with the tractor trailer. So already he had his first day today, and he seems to be really someone who's going to fit in. And then we made an offer to a town employee from a different department who accepted the offer and seems like a good fit. So we are very soon we will be fully staffed, which is amazing, especially going into the winter, into snow season, leaf season. The holiday season for us is very busy with all the recycling that comes out of the holidays. So it's all good news. And then just in terms of recycling trends, fiber, which is cardboard and paper, is rising. We are doing really well with cardboard revenues. Paper costs are $1.60, I think, per ton, which is amazing. That's, you know, it had been $30 per ton to process. That's trending really well. Because both of those materials are available and easily sorted from a single stream load, single stream costs are rising with that they call it fiber. But the bad part of that, of the recycling trends, is that plastics and the commingled recycling is really struggling, and the cost per ton is really, I think it's in the 80s right now, cost per ton to process a load of the commingled. So that's not ideal. But
and it's light, right? So
it's light.
It's
light, yeah. But we send out probably about 7 or 8 loads, you know, per month, probably about 6.5 tons per load.
That's why it's so costly to him, because it's more because
the trash rate is separate from, or I mean, the transportation rate is separate from that. So that's just a processing rate from the facility where it goes. But yeah, that's not trending in the right direction. But those are the 2 updates, but the staffing is significant, and it's a really big deal for us to be fully staffed.
How much revenue do you think we lose by people throwing cardboard in the paper bin?
Not that much. It's not a huge amount. I mean, it's some, but cardboard's fairly light. I mean,
but like you said, the revenue is increasing on the cardboard end of things, and not so much on the paper end. Yeah. It drives me nuts. I sometimes reach down and grab the boxes out.
I'm with you. Yeah, it's not something I can really calculate, but
if we were to, I know the commingled, and I know that there's space constraints, but if we were to do just plastic and just metals, would that drive anything?
I mean, the problem is you get it out to Casella and they don't sort it separately, so they put it in the same pile.
Yeah.
No, I mean, but it's true. I mean, you have to think of recycling in a stream, and if any point in that line is interrupted, the process goes back. So if we separate it here, but it comes to the facility and they add it back together again,
It's wasted
you know,
labor.
what have you done?
It's wasted labor.
So,
And aggravation for the people who use their gas.
but I don't know, I don't really have a reason why plastics are doing so poorly.
Just to recycle it, probably.
Yeah, I mean, I got a good report, an interesting report of, you know, the next couple months, future of what our different recycling commodities are gonna look like. They project that fiber and cardboard are gonna rise, continue that rise, but there was a discussion of why number 2 plastics was struggling. But I don't see it as being, I don't know why it's affected so much. Maybe there's just more contamination, different types of plastic, blends of plastics. You know, we really need to start fighting against packaging companies that are mixing plastics in one type of packaging so that it can't be sorted accurately for recycling. Like if you have multiple pieces in a single packaging, it doesn't process out. So they'll put a coating on the inside of a plastic container and then put paper on the top or something. And it's multiple types of materials in one container, and they say recyclable, and it's not.
You know, I mean, the problem doesn't lie, you know, at this end of things, right? The problem lies, you know, in the packaging company, right, and all of that. And, you know, certainly.
But I mean, consumers have a role in that, pushing back against what they buy and how it comes to them.
But I think, you know, I mean, I think the recyclers, they have to find a use for a way of recycling what the market is creating. You know, because, you know, there's, you know, with the wish cycling, you know, that everybody just throws in everything without looking, you know, I gotta say, I don't study the numbers, you know, if it's plastic, it's plastic, you know, and, right, and they gotta figure out something to do with it. I mean, they're pulling out the things that don't qualify for their numbers, right? Well, what do they do with it? They just throw it in the trash, you know, and, you know, maybe there should be some incentive for them to finding a use for those other plastics and, you know, and make it a circle. I don't.
Yeah, well, limited trash capacity in this state is gonna drive that. I mean, eventually that's what's pushing it, right?
Yeah. And I ran into someone who ran an advocacy thing, and she talked to me about this, and I don't remember like that, and it you know, and it made my head hurt that she was so knowledgeable around all those things and where she was advocating. And says, well, you know, good, rather people like you there, because I don't have that time or space. But I think that's where the thing's gonna happen.
Or you make it punitive, like in Europe. You go to buy a bottle of water, whatever, and it's 15 cents euro. As opposed to 5 cents here. So the incentive is, I say punitive, but the incentive is far exceeds you just throwing it in the bin.
You know, I love things in Europe, and it's, you know, you know, you say it's punitive. I mean, you know, here, you know, when you fly in airlines, right, and you have an overweight bag, you know, it's like, oh, your bag is overweight, we're gonna penalize you, and you got to go do this, right? If you go up there in Europe, and they go, oh, well, you didn't sign up for the overweight bag, you know, it's just a drop down menu like kind of thing here, and you know, there's a desk right over there, you can go pay the thing, you know, so they don't beat you up and, you know, about it. They just say, oh, you forgot to do that, and there's a process to make it easy for you.
There's all kinds of examples though.
Yeah.
Like, you can't get one of the carts, the carriages, without putting a euro in, and you pull it out, and you don't get your euro back until you put the chain into the one that's in front of you, and then you get to take your coin back.
Yeah.
Then you don't have to worry about the shopping cart narc or whatever is being done on YouTube.
All
Well,
these things,
rather, so we don't digress.
Do they?
Yes, supermarket in Natick.
Oh, really? Well,
In Walpole.
Aldi's actually is a
In
German
Natick,
company.
Yeah,
They actually bought Trader Joe's. I think very few people know that.
Who did?
Yeah, Aldi? Yeah, the German grocery folks. I'm actually glad to hear that they do that in Natick.
I'll look into that. Well, scheduling, so we're talking, when are we talking for the?
I'm
with the select
thinking
board?
the third, well, going before the select board will be on November the 14th, which would be the public hearing. And presumably, they would then adopt their recommendations, at the next meeting, which would be November 28th. Presuming that, it's favorable, I would anticipate the next meeting for the committee would be after the new year. Looking at January 16th, which is the third Wednesday of January.
Third.
I said Wednesday, thinking finance committee, third Tuesday.
Okay.
And just to have it in the books, then perhaps having the other one, it's winter time, you never know what happens. Look at, also reserving in your calendars, February 20th.
that may be during the break. I don't know if that
It is
impacts
school,
anyone.
it is school vacation week.
Is that a problem for anybody? We want to try and reschedule that or?
Not a problem for me.
It's a bit of a challenge for me, but I might be able to dial in from some nights.
Yeah, it's not ideal for me either, but
Excellent. Okay,
So, then, look at, March 5th, which is the first Monday of March, other than the third,
Tuesday, first
Yes.
Tuesday.
yes, Tuesday, yes,
Been a long week already, hasn't it?
which is, it is March 5th, Tuesday, March 5th, instead of, February 20th.
So instead of February 20th.
Instead of February 20th, correct.
what was that date?
I'm suggesting the two dates to get in your calendars is January 16th, which is the third Tuesday of January, and March 5th, which is the first Tuesday of March.
I guess the next motion we need is,
You don't need a motion on it, just as long as the committee is
no, I mean,
comfortable
I was
with
gonna
it.
ask for a motion to
Oh.
adjourn.
Will we, make a motion, will we adjourn?
Do I have a second?
Second.
Can I say all in favor?
You can on that.
Aye.
14th. 14th.